Okay, let's work on the notification count in the badge here, as well as a few other small things. So let's go to our component. Let's add a new piece of state here called notification count. And we can set it here in the mount method, but I'm just going to put it in a method because I know I'm going to make use of it in several places. So let's say this get notification count. Okay. And let's go ahead and make that method. Let's put it right underneath. Get notification count. Okay. So let's go ahead and set that. So this notification count. And we can get this from the logged in user. So we can do auth user unread notifications like we did in here. But we just want to grab the count. Unread notifications. And let's make sure we're doing it at the database layer. So let's call it as a method instead of loading it all at once in memory. And then we can call count. And we'll do the same thing here in a second. Okay. So now in the view, we can make use of this notification count. So back to our view, comment notifications. Instead of this hard-coded 8 here, we can just echo out that notification count. Okay. Cool. Does that work? Doesn't seem to work. Sorry. There should be notification count. Refresh. And we have 5. So that should be correct. There are 5 in here. Cool. So I think I have another user logged in my other window here. And this should be 0. Okay. But I don't want this to show up if there are no notifications. So in the view, we can just check for it in here. So we can just wrap this in an if, if. So we can just check for the notification count. And if it's at least 1, then it should render. Okay. And now, since this user doesn't have any, it should not render. Okay, cool. This should still be the same. Now, I also want a threshold for the number here. For example, if it's over a certain number of notifications, I just want it to show that number plus. So for example, if we have over 10 notifications, just say 10 plus instead of how many notifications there are. So we can do that in our method here. Back here, we can just do a check here. Let's say if this notification count is greater than some sort of threshold, let's just say 3 for now since we have 5, then we can reassign it. So we can just do this. Let me grab this here. And we can just say equals this with a plus appended. Okay. Does this work? So it should say 3 plus because that's the threshold I'm using. Okay. There we go. Sorry, this should be the threshold counts. So 3 in this case. Like this. Sorry, I meant as a string. There we go. But if I were to mark 2 of them as red or just delete them, let me just delete 3 of them actually. So let's delete 3 of these. Then it should just show the actual count. Okay. So I'm going to put that in a constant instead, so we don't have any magic numbers floating around. So let's say const notification threshold equals, I'm going to say 20. Or let's say 3 for now to make sure it still works. And we can just say self : notification threshold. Same for this. But now we can append the plus here. Oops, say self. Okay, does this still work? 2 still works. Let me add 2 more comments. 1 comment. Another comment. And let's see if this works. So we have 3 plus now. Cool. So let me just change the threshold here to something bigger, say 20. Awesome. Okay, with that threshold in place, we also want to limit the amount of notifications that show here. So again, let me set it to something low so we can see it. So back to 3. And in here, where we're grabbing our unread notifications, we want to make sure that we only grab that amount of notifications. So instead of grabbing everything, because this can potentially have thousands of records and we don't want to load everything into memory, let's make sure we grab it from the database and let's make sure the latest is on top. I think that's the default, but that's okay. And let's take the threshold here. So again, self notification threshold. So it's only going to take max 3 in this case. And let's also make sure to get them. Let me reformat this. And sorry, this should be an underscore. Okay, let's try that out. So it should only show 3, but there are 4 notifications. So let's try this out. There we go, only 3, but there are 4 here in the database. Okay, so that does work correctly. So if you wanted to have a more detailed view, you can have a dedicated page that shows all of your notifications, for example, filtered by all notifications or unread notifications, and you can manage everything in that page. But for this, I'm okay with just setting a threshold and showing that amount here. So let's set it back to something sensible. 20 is fine. Cool. Okay, let's go back into the other account here, and this has no notifications. And if we click it, we get this. So I just want to have a placeholder in here, just like we have a placeholder for when no ideas are found. Okay, so let's grab that. I believe that's in ideas index. Is it in here? Yeah, so it's this right here. So we can grab this, go back to our view, and where's the for each here? Right here, we don't need this. And I can't use for else here because I have this extra li, which has the mark all as read button right here. So we'll just use an if here. So let's wrap this in another if or a conditional. So if notifications is not empty, then go ahead and do this. So let's indent this. Okay. But if it is empty, let's go ahead and add an else case and end the if here. And we can paste in that placeholder we have. Okay. Let's say no notifications. Or let's say no new notifications is better. Okay. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so that's kind of big. Actually, it should go around the whole thing, so I don't want this to show. Yeah, I put the else in the wrong place. So let me grab this. Should be after this. Or is after the unordered list? No, it should just be after this list item here. So let's do this. And I guess this has to be an li as well. Not sure if that will change anything. Okay. So I just want to make this a bit smaller. Let's say with 40. And let's put a padding on it instead of a margin, py6. Okay, that looks good to me. And I want to add one more case here, and that case is when the notifications are loading. So from the last video, if you remember, we are only loading the notifications if the user clicks on this bell icon here. So it happens really quick here on local development, so you can't really see them loading in. However, in reality, there might be a slight loading time for that to happen. So we can simulate a loading time in our component here. So when we get notifications here. Let's just sleep for say a second or something, then you'll see it. So I see no new notifications, and then they do load in. So we can either add a loading spinner or a skeleton loader. So I prefer skeleton loaders, as when the content does load in, it's not as abrupt. So let's go ahead and do that. So first we need a new piece of state to check if it's loading or not. So let's do that first. Back here, let's say is loading. Okay. And let's say is loading is true here. It's loading by default. And then after it's loading down here, so after this, we can say is loading is false. So let's set this to false. Okay. Let me increase the count here so we can see it. Say 2 seconds. And then in our view, we have to add an else if case here. So the first case, or the first if it's not empty and we're not loading, not is loading, and go ahead and do this. Else if is the second case. So right here, or not here, over here. Else if, and the case is loading, or the case is loading. Okay. And let's just say skeleton loader here. Okay. So let's see if this is correct. Okay, so it does work. Cool. Oh yeah, and if you're not familiar with a skeleton loader, if you go to YouTube, before the content loads in, you'll see placeholders for them. So you see those boxes. So that's what we're trying to replicate just for this. So we can do this for the ideas as well. We are using Livewire here, so we can do something similar for the ideas. But for now, I'm just going to do it for the notifications. Okay. So now we just have to replicate this content with boxes and lines. So let's just do one of them. Should be easy enough. And then we can just write a loop to repeat it. Okay. Actually, this should be a list item because it's within an unordered list. Okay. And say class equals flex, items center. And let's copy the transition on these other ones. So all of this, we can grab the padding as well. Let's paste that in here. And the first flex item is going to be the image. So let's just replicate that with a box. So this image. So let's say BG gray, say 200, rounded XL, width 10, height 10. Okay, see how that looks. Okay, now we just need these lines here. So I'm going to make 3 lines, and hopefully that looks okay. So let's say ML4 to give it some margin on the left. And I want 3 lines here, so let's do BG gray 200 with full. Let's make it rounded. And let's give it a height of 4. Okay. And let's do that 3 times. See how that looks. Let me increase the sleep time. Okay, nothing is showing up. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. Maybe flex 1. Try again. Okay, so there it is. But there's no space in between the lines. So let's say space Y4. Or let's try 2. Okay, looks good. And let's make the last line a bit smaller. So width 1/2 is good for me. And that looks pretty good to me. So let's go ahead and wrap this in a for each, and we'll do it 3 times. So say B for each. You can just use range 1 to 3 as item, and then we can just put this in there. Okay. See how that looks. And that looks pretty good. And let's put it back to something we can see, and then have the content load in after. So we have it, and then the content loads in after. I believe Tailwind has some animation classes built in, so let's see if we can make use of that. So this one right here is made for skeleton loaders called Pulse. All we have to do is add animate pulse, and that should add this effect here, where it fades in and out slowly. So let's add that. Let's make this a bit longer so we can see it. Animate pulse. Let's try that out. And you can see it have a subtle fade in and out before the content loads in. Cool. So you probably won't even see that because it should load fast enough, but it's there if the content takes a while to load. So let me just remove that sleep, and I think that should be fine. Again, you won't even see that loader because it loads so quickly on development, but it's there in the background if you want to see it, or if your connection is slow. So as always, let's make a commit here. This is episode 61, git add, git commit, episode 61, badge, count, and skeleton loader.